Hi there, it's Matt here, and welcome back to the podcast. I want to begin today with someone you probably recognize. Maybe it's you, maybe it's the person sitting across from you at breakfast, staring at their phone without really reading it. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah is not, by any conventional measure, a bad sleeper. She goes to bed at a reasonable hour. She doesn't lie awake, cataloging the things she forgot to do. She doesn't bolt upright at 2 a.m. in the grip of some mysterious internal alarm. She sleeps, genuinely, unambiguously sleeps, for 7 or sometimes 8 hours. The little device on her wrist confirms it. Falls asleep in 9 minutes. Stays asleep soundly across the night. Unremarkable by every quantifiable standard. And yet, every single morning, Sarah wakes up feeling like something didn't take. Not dramatically. This isn't the floor-level depletion of someone who pulled an all-nighter. It is subtler and more persistent than that. A low-grade dimness. A muted, slightly blurry version of being awake that never quite resolves into clarity. She is short-tempered by 9 a.m. in a way she can't fully account for. Her ability to hold a thought starts to deteriorate before lunch. She has quietly doubled her coffee intake over the past year without registering it as a behavioral change, just a necessity. And when her doctor asks at the annual physical how the sleep is going, Sarah genuinely struggles to answer. Because technically, it's fine. It looks fine. The numbers are in the green. What Sarah is living with has a name. It is called non-restorative sleep. And today I want to walk you through what the science currently understands about it, because what she is experiencing is not a lifestyle inconvenience, not a character deficiency, and not something that more caffeine is going to fix. It is, as the research is increasingly demonstrating, a clinically significant condition with measurable consequences for health and function, and one that the mainstream medical system is only just beginning to take seriously. Let me start with the numbers, because they are striking. A study done by researcher Maurice Ohayon surveyed more than 25,000 people across 7 European countries and found that approximately 1 in 10 adults experienced non-restorative sleep on a regular basis. That figure climbed to roughly 1 in 8 women. When you combine those findings with other broad survey data, the prevalence estimates extend as high as 1 in 3 adults. Between 10 and 30% of the people around you may be waking every morning feeling precisely like Sarah, unrested despite apparently adequate sleep. And the great majority of them have never heard the term that describes their experience. Many of them have been told explicitly by a clinician or implicitly by a normal-looking test result that their sleep is fine. My field itself has struggled with this condition, in part because defining it has proved surprisingly difficult. A group of researchers led by Pierre Geoffroy recently conducted a systematic review of the non-restorative sleep literature and made an observation that struck me as both honest and slightly troubling. Non-restorative sleep is not an established or declining concept, they noted, but one that is re-emerging, returning to the foreground of sleep science after years of sitting at its edges, undefined, unmeasured, and largely unaddressed. What Geoffroy's group found when they looked carefully at the evidence was that non-restorative sleep is not simply a sleep complaint in isolation. It travels with an unexpectedly broad constellation of health consequences, elevated rates of anxiety, depression, chronic pain conditions, and metabolic disruption. Non-restorative sleep, in their assessment, is not a symptom of other problems. For many people, it appears to be the driver of them. To understand why that clinical reassurance is so inadequate, you have to appreciate what sleep is actually for. A genuinely restorative night flushes toxic waste from the brain, consolidates the day's memories, repairs the body's tissues, and emotionally recalibrates the mind, none of which can be accomplished any other way. Non-restorative sleep is not the absence of sleep. It is the absence of all that restorative sleep provides. The clinical stakes have become difficult to ignore. A large longitudinal study drawing on data from approximately 86,000 people in Japan found that non-restorative sleep at the study's baseline was a significant independent risk factor for major cardiac and cerebrovascular events over the follow-up period: heart attacks, strokes, serious clinical outcomes, after controlling for other contributing variables. Around 1/3 of that entire sample showed non-restorative sleep at the outset. This is not a niche finding buried in a specialty journal. It is a population-level signal connecting the simple feeling of not being rested to hard, measurable, clinically consequential outcomes tracked across years. Non-restorative sleep does not merely inconvenience, it harms.
So for, oh gosh, it must be at least a decade now, I have been an avid, probably more like rabid consumer of protein shakes. But the hard thing, honestly, in the supplement space, if you really understand and do your diligence, is this critical thing called trust. It is very hard to find a brand that you can truly trust. That's when I came across the company Puri and the really impressive founder. Even though I'm sure it makes them less profit versus other quick and loose companies, Puri takes quality more seriously than any company I've ever seen before. They have so many offerings, gosh, protein powders galore, but lots of other additions. But that's what I was focusing on here. Why did I choose them? Well, it's really for 4 specific reasons. Number 1, they are free from hormones. Number 2, they are free from GMOs. Number 3, they are free of any pesticides. And number 4, and this is the critical confidence part, every single batch is third-party tested for over 200 harmful contaminants, things like heavy metals, etc. All you have to do if you are a neurotic nerd like me, you can even scan the QRI code on the back of the product to get the third-party independent laboratory test results. That's how much trust and confidence they place in their product. By the way, if you want a recommendation, go for the dark chocolate flavored protein powder. It's just exceptional. In fact, it's wonderfully addictive. I didn't just say that. Anyway, it delivers 21 grams of protein per serving. And for folks of my podcast right now, you can save 20%. So go over to puri.com/Matt Walker, and that is spelled PUORI.com, Matt Walker. So again, that is PUORI.com/Matt Walker, and you will get 20% off your product.
Here is where the science gets genuinely challenging. In a meaningful proportion of people with non-restorative sleep, the standard overnight sleep study and the polysomnogram comes back looking unremarkable. Normal sleep onset, normal total sleep time, normal continuity. The standard instrument reports a normal night. The person who spent that night feels the opposite. The restoration never happened. Sleep researchers Tim Roth and colleagues made a crucial argument that helps clarify this paradox. Non-restorative sleep, they proposed, should be understood not merely as a symptom that travels alongside other insomnia presentations, but as something with its own independent clinical identity. The practical implication is significant. It means that treating difficulty falling asleep or reducing nocturnal awakenings will not automatically resolve the non-restorative sleep complaint. In many patients, the two problems operate through entirely separate pathways. You can successfully address someone's sleep initiation difficulties, and their sense of non-restoration can persist, completely unaffected. Standard clinical responses to insomnia may, in these patients, be aimed at the wrong target entirely. And here I want to say something that I think may be wrong, but could be worth enunciating, something that has changed the way I personally approach this condition. I have come to believe that we need to think about non-restorative sleep in a fundamentally different way. I don't see non-restorative sleep as a sleep disorder. I see it as a daytime wakefulness disorder. And when you view it that way, for me at least, it opens onto a very different set of potential underlying mechanisms and a very different set of potential treatments. Rather than continuing to mine the electrical static of the night for answers, which so far we have largely failed to find, perhaps we should instead be looking into the waking day itself and exploring the possibility of deficiencies in the capacity for sustained, robust wakefulness. It is as if we have been searching for the source of a river by standing at the riverbank in the dark when the spring that feeds it is miles away in broad daylight, waiting to be found. But I digress. The link to psychiatric illness is particularly striking. Ohayon, in separate work from his large European prevalence study, found that non-restorative sleep was an independent predictor of major depressive disorder. Independent, that is, of other sleep parameters. It wasn't simply that people who slept badly became depressed. People who slept apparently adequately in duration, but without restoration, were still significantly more likely to develop depression over time. The sleep was there, the repair wasn't, and the mental health consequences accumulated regardless. This finding matters because it draws a direct line between the specific failure of restorative sleep architecture and a clinical psychiatric outcome, not mediated by how much sleep a person got, but by whether that sleep actually worked. What then is going on inside the sleeping brain of someone with non-restorative sleep that the standard sleep study is not catching? The most compelling answer in the current literature involves a specific stage of sleep that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. Deep sleep, the stage characterized by large, slow electrical waves rolling across the brain in coordinated, synchronized patterns. It is the stage that carries the disproportionate share of sleep's restorative workload. And the evidence suggests it is the stage that non-restorative sleep is most severely compromising. The experiment that demonstrated this most precisely was conducted by Patrick Finan and colleagues at Johns Hopkins University. They took healthy adults and divided them into 3 groups. One group slept normally for 3 nights in uninterrupted full opportunity. A second group had their total sleep time restricted. They simply went to bed late, objectively losing sleep across the study period. The third group had their sleep fragmented through forced nocturnal awakenings, repeatedly interrupted throughout the night in a way designed to disrupt sleep architecture without dramatically cutting total sleep duration. After 3 nights, the results were striking. The forced awakening group reported a decline in positive mood of approximately 31%. The sleep-restricted group, who had actually lost more total sleep, reported a decline of around 12%. Fragmented sleep, at a comparable total duration, was more than twice as damaging to mood as simple sleep restriction. The statistical analysis pointed directly at deep, slow-wave sleep to explain why. The forced awakenings had selectively suppressed it. Deep sleep functions like the load-bearing wall of a building Remove it, and the whole structure weakens, even when the surrounding framework still looks intact from the outside. This is not merely a quantity problem. It never was. And that single finding, that the restorative value of sleep is shaped by the integrity of what happens inside the hours, not simply by how many hours accumulate, is perhaps the most important scientific sentence in this entire episode. A partner for today's episode is AG1. I've been using AG1 for quite some time now, and just for the record, I buy it myself to stay away from any of those trappings of free product. AG1 has just released the new formulation, which is AG1 Next Gen. It's still one scoop once a day, but now comes with many upgraded probiotics, plus additional vitamins and minerals. I also explored their 4 human clinical trials to prove out their efficacy, with the data showing a marked boost in healthy gut bacteria. And that's the thing. I appreciate how AG1 keeps adapting to new scientific findings. They have made many formula changes over the years, and each new iteration keeps it at the cutting edge of this space. As I've mentioned, I began my AG1 journey over 4 years ago. Any company that holds their scientific rigor to the flames of clinical trials means a lot to me. So subscribe today to try the next gen of AG1. If you use the following link, you'll also get a free bottle of AGD 3K2, as well as an AG1 welcome kit and 5 of the upgraded AG1 travel packs with your first order. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/mattwalker. That's drinkag1.com/mattwalker. There is a related phenomenon that deserves considerably more clinical attention than it typically receives. Sleep inertia. Most of us are familiar with the disorientation and cognitive fog that follow abrupt awakening, those first minutes before the brain properly re-engages with the world. Research established long ago that awakening from deep, slow-wave sleep produces the most pronounced version of this experience. But the mechanism behind sleep inertia, what is actually happening inside the brain during those foggy minutes, remained poorly understood until very recently. This is where the work of Dr. Raphael Vallat becomes extraordinary. I want to say something about Raphael before I describe what he found, because I think it matters. He is one of the most genuinely gifted young scientists working in sleep research today, the kind of mind that you encounter perhaps once a decade. I have had the privilege of working alongside him, and I can tell you that being around his cycling, combining electrical brain recordings with whole brain functional imaging in real time, and for the first time made the invisible visible. What Vallat found, published in Neuroimage in 2019, was remarkable. When people woke from deep, slow-wave sleep, their brains were not simply switching on. The electrical signatures of deep sleep, the slow, rolling waves, were still present in the waking brain, literally intruding into what should have been conscious alertness. And when he looked at the functional brain imaging data, he found something even more striking. The brain's major functional networks, the circuits responsible for focused attention and outwardly directed action, and the separate circuit associated with internal thought and mind wandering, had lost their normal separation. In a well-rested, fully alert brain, these networks operate as distinct, clearly differentiated systems. But in the minutes following awakening from deep sleep, their boundaries had collapsed. They had merged into a single, undifferentiated mass of muddled activity, like a compass needle that has lost its north, spinning without direction, unable to commit to any single heading. The grogginess, in other words, is not merely a feeling. It is a measurable neurological state. The brain's architecture is still configured for sleep. Its functional systems have not yet resegregated into their waking roles. And this disruption was worst and most extreme precisely when awakening occurred from the deepest stages of sleep, directly explaining why the depth of prior sleep and the severity of sleep inertia travel together. You are not imagining that it is harder to think straight after being woken from a deep sleep. The imaging data shows you exactly what is happening. For individuals who's not with a clean cognitive transition, but through a neurological fog that should lift, and for these individuals often does not lift as fully or as quickly as it should. Raphael's subsequent work has extended this in directions that are equally compelling. In a 2022 study published in Nature Communications involving over 800 participants, he and our team found that how alert a person feels upon waking is only about 25% determined by genetics. The remaining 75% is governed by modifiable behavior, principally the quality and quantity of sleep the night before, physical activity during the preceding day, and the composition of breakfast. Grogginess is not fate. It is, to a very large degree, the predictable consequence of what we do with our biology. A long-standing partner of today's podcast is Element, spelled L-M-N-T. Element is a sugar-free electrolyte drink mix, and for me, it was the sugar-free part that made me start using it a while back. And again, I buy my own supply just to stay objective. Beyond having the electrolytes in the right balance, the other reason I'm a fan of Element is that it's scientific. If you look up the people who created the company, you'll find some pretty heavy-hitting physiology, biochemistry, and pharmacology knowledge baked into the product. And again, all of that comes without any sugar. Now, here's the update. Element's lemonade salt flavor, which used to be seasonal, was so popular that it's now permanent. You can get it year-round. Happily, I badgered them, and they have agreed to give you fine folks a free 8-count sample pack with any purchase of Element if you use the link drinklmnt.com/Matt Walker. So for free product with your purchase, just visit drinklmnt.com/Matt Walker. And as I said, you'll get some free product. I want to turn now to something that operates at a larger structural scale, a phenomenon that contributes to compromised sleep quality for a significant fraction of the adult population, but is rarely discussed in those terms. Researchers call it social jet lag. Every human being carries an internal biological clock, a circadian rhythm calibrated over millions of years of evolution to the 24-hour light and dark cycle. But not everyone carries the same clock settings. Some people are biologically oriented toward earlier sleep and waking times. Others are oriented toward later. These differences are called chronotypes, and they are substantially determined by biology, including genetic factors, rather than by habits or choices. The problem is that modern social infrastructure largely assumes an early chronotype. Schools begin early, standard working hours begin early. For those whose internal clock runs 2 or 3 hours behind social convention, teenagers and young adults in particular, the result is chronic circadian mismatch. A research team led by Till Roeneberg and Mark Wittman tracked more than 500 volunteers and found exactly this. People with later chronotypes accumulated sleep debt across the working week, reported lower psychological well-being, and used more stimulants. They were not sleeping badly by choice. They were sleeping badly because the schedule imposed on them ran counter to their biology. Social jet lag is a population-scale, institutionally embedded contributor to non-restorative sleep. The cognitive picture is equally sobering. Research examining the daytime neuropsychological profile of people with non-restorative sleep has found measurable deficits in sustained attention, processing speed, and working memory, deficits that closely resemble those seen after experimentally induced sleep deprivation, even when total sleep time was objectively normal. Sarah's inability to hold a thought before lunch is not a perception. It is a measurable neurological reality. Among all the findings in the non-restorative sleep literature, there is one that most clearly illustrates why this condition deserves far more clinical infrastructure than it currently receives. When you compare people reporting non-restorative sleep to people reporting other forms of insomnia, something distinctive emerges in their daytime profile. Ohio's large European study found that non-restorative sleep sufferers reported daytime impairment more frequently across multiple dimensions, more irritability, more physical fatigue, more mental fatigue, compared to those with other insomnia presentations. And non-restorative sleep sufferers were consulting physicians for their sleep difficulties at twice the rate of those with insomnia, twice the consultation rate. Consider what that number actually means. A complaint that currently lacks a universally agreed diagnostic definition that routinely produces normal-looking overnight sleep studies, and that sits outside the comfortable reach of standard insomnia treatment protocols, is driving twice the medical help seeking of more easily categorized sleep conditions. People are showing up in primary care unable to articulate what is wrong, receiving normal test results, and leaving without a coherent clinical answer. That gap between the scale of the burden and the infrastructure available to address it is one of the most consequential unresolved problems in sleep medicine today. The path forward is clear enough, even if the road is long. Validated questionnaires for measuring non-restorative sleep already exist, and the evidence, 86,000 participants linked to hard cardiovascular outcomes, demonstrates their real-world utility at scale. Subjective sleep quality is a health signal. It belongs in the standard toolkit of preventive medicine alongside blood pressure and cholesterol. And on the research side, the specific brain signatures of deep sleep and what disrupts them are active frontiers that are moving fast. Let me come back to Sarah. She is not a statistical abstraction. She is carrying a legitimate, evidence-backed clinical burden that the system is not yet fully equipped to name, measure, or treat. Her doctor is not wrong with the data currently available to them. The data are simply incomplete. And Sarah is right. Something is not working. The warehouse is open all night. The workers never showed up. And if we are right, if non-restorative sleep is, at its core, a disorder not of the night, but of the day, a failure not of sleep itself, but of wakefulness, then the implications for Sarah are profound. It means that the answers may not be found by looking harder at her sleep. They may be found by looking more carefully at her waking hours, at the quality and vigor of her daytime alertness, the steadiness of her attentional and wakefulness activation brain networks, the integrity of the biological machinery that is supposed to keep her fully, robustly conscious during the 16 hours she is not asleep. The problem, in other words, may not be that her nights are broken. The problem may be that her days never truly begin. What non-restorative sleep ultimately teaches us is something quietly radical, that the subjective feeling of waking unrefreshed is not a soft variable at the edges of clinical relevance. It is precise biological information about whether the machinery of restoration is doing its job. Sleep is not something that simply happens to you. It is something your brain either earns or doesn't. For the 1 in 10 adults who wake every morning feeling exactly like Sarah, getting this right is simply the difference between being seen by the health system and being sent away with normal results. Sleep has always been a quality problem. That's the only ask. Take care, and bye for now.